Good morning, staff, members of the committee, and members of the public in the gallery. Thanks for joining us. We don't often get an audience, so it's lovely to have you here. Look, we have a very full agenda today, so we are going to crack straight into it. We'll start off with our karakia. Whakataka toho ki te uru, whakataka toho ki tonga, kia mahina ki uta, kia mata ki tu. Iha itia ihuka ihu tihemu. Thank you very much. So we have a couple of apologies for lateness, Councillor Young and Councillor Proctor, and apology for the entire meeting from Councillor Grimstone. I'll move that those apologies be accepted. Have a second. Thank you, Mayor Burney. All in favour? Thank you very much. So we just have one late item which is in front of you, which is a letter from Mayor Burney to Clint Ramu, who's just arrived with us. And so that, if I could move that we accept that, and we'll add that to the discussion under item 6.1. Seconded by Councillor Olsen. All in favour? Any against? Thank you. Any declarations of interest? There being none, we'll move on to confirmation of the minutes. If I could move that we confirm the meeting minutes from the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting of 7th of August be accepted as a true and correct record. I'm second for that. Councillor Olsen, all in favour? Thank you. So because of our full agenda today, we will be taking all of the reports as read and providing officers with just a very short moment to headline any key messages. But what we are going to do, just in the interest of time, is I'm going to move that we receive and note all of the reports in one go, and note that the matters or decisions to be considered are not significant in terms of the Local Government Act. If I could have a second for that. Thank you, Mayor Burney. All in favour? Thank you very much. So we're going to crack right into, unless there's anything I'm forgetting, no, we're going to crack right into 6.1, which is the draft annual report. So invite Clint up to the table, please. And we've got Peishan and Lydia. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And so just very, very quickly just cover off, so obviously the draft annual report is with this committee because this committee obviously is interested in the audit process, risk and those internal controls. And so we welcome you to talk to us about the annual report. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So we're here to present the draft annual report for 23-24 financial year. We held a workshop on the 25th of September and we went through the preliminary results, unaudited results on the annual report. Since then, material movements, including revaluation gain of 92 million, have been updated. That's included in this draft annual report. As well as that, we had to restate 22-23 results due to a classification change between cash and other financial assets. So that's impacted on balance sheet, cash flow, a couple of notes in the annual report, and the operating control benchmark graph. So the restatement was shown in a column named Restated Council Actual. So this is following advice from Audit New Zealand. We received the misstatement schedule from Audit New Zealand yesterday, and staff are working through updating the annual report on that one. And so we intend to make available a revised annual report copy for Audit New Zealand by next Tuesday. And as we speak now, Clint and his team, they are still performing their audits on our annual report, and hence we have Clint here to provide us with an update.
Thank you, Peishan. Thank you, members of the committee. So as Peishan's indicated, we're still working our way through the audit. Some of the key things that we've dealt with to date, that was, we thought to take a lot of effort, is the service performance information. So we've closed that off. Last year we had a few issues at the end, but that's been dealt with. The revenue side of the income statement's also been completed. The big pieces of work, Chair, that's outstanding that we're still working through is the revaluations. They are challenging just generally across the sector at the moment. I think on the three water side, it is looking within the ranges that we'd expect, but there's still some work that we're doing around unit cost rates, etc. on that. But from the valuation report and the details that supported that, it looks like council is within the accepted ranges. On the roading as well, I mean, we've just come out of a meeting now talking about the roading valuation. My colleagues will cringe when I say this. My gut feel is that it looks right, but we still need to just get through some of the details of. There's a lot of ups and downs, given some of the work that council's done in cleaning up and consolidating everything onto the RAM system. It's us just getting that assurance that we understand the movements that have happened, because what you see on your accounts is one number, but there's a whole lot of things that's happened in the background to get it to that number. And I'm just wanting to be comfortable, because where it's sitting now, intuitively, it doesn't look like it's the right percentage increase, given that your last revaluation was done 2 years ago in 2022. When you take what's on the accounts now, we're talking about a 3% movement. And last year we had a fair value assessment that was peer reviewed by your experts that said the movement was for 1 year was 3.1%. So now it just doesn't stack up, if you do the sniff test. So it's just some work, and I think we've got a way forward in just unpacking that 9 million, because there's a bit of overs and unders as a result of the cleanup. So we're working through that. And the misstatements, we did provide management with a copy of our misstatements to date. Most of those are disclosures and just tidies up in the accounts. Patients alluded to some of the other misstatements around just classification, and that's understand as you would have heard is going through. The one misstatement that I understand you've also been taken through is the prior period error on the cash flow statement. So that will not affect your audit report, but what it does require is some additional disclosures in the accounts, and we taking that through our processes to get it cleared. So, Chair, what it does do, it will change the number that was reported last year as your net cash flow from operating activities number and your net investment number. So it's just more, I just keep saying it is quite material. It's moving it out of the one line onto the other line. On your cash flow statement, but that has the impact of just washing through the rest of the cash flow statement. So that we knew about quite early in the year, and we'll put through that changes as well. Actually, I think those are the only things from my side. We provided feedback on the annual report earlier to management, and understand that those will be reflected in the next version that we get. I can see from the corner of my eye, Bernie's wanting to know the real question, which is, are we on track? Thanks for your letter. I haven't recovered, but I think we're on track. The idea is to give clearance next week, verbal clearance next week Friday, and for adoption the following Wednesday. Yeah.
Thank you, Clint. Did officers have any? Did you have any commentary based on anything that Clint's relayed? Any further? Just a quick question before I open it up to other members. Clint, you talked about the revaluation and some of the challenges with that, and so I understand, for the committee's benefit, that some of those challenges have arisen because of a change in council systems, and that's obviously there's a really positive change in terms of what we're trying to trying to do and trying to achieve in terms of the change to systems. But can you just talk us through very briefly around, what sort of the nature of the challenges that you're facing there?
Thank you, Chi. I think, for the Three Waters, councils consolidated from a few subsystems. I'll give it a nice word. It's really spreadsheets to an IPS system. So it's us getting comfort that the information that was transferred from those subsystems actually ended up on the new IPS single system. So that it's just that reconciliation. So things haven't dropped off, and we end up with valuing the wrong information or incomplete information. So that's and it's similar to RAM. There's been no transfer of data, but councils reverted to RAM, which is a road asset management. I don't know what the second M stands for now. System. To drop out its valuation. And again, both of these are good initiatives. So we're not saying they're flawed or anything to that regard. It's right to do it like that, have it on a single system. With that updating of RAM, from our discussions, there was quite a few things that emerged, what was being valued, the unit rates, and that's created some of this confusion for us about, you ended up with 9 million, but there's some assets that were valued that shouldn't have been valued. There's assets that should have been valued that haven't been valued, and all of that cleanup has taken place, and it's washing through this year. We have a fair amount of headroom here for it before it becomes a material error. So that's what we're just looking for, is just that analysis, and so when it nets off, it comes to the 9 million, we're comfortable with it. And then obviously to do the unit rate testing that's sitting on RAM, because that's driven from council's contracts. So the way the valuations take place is using your latest contracts or any other information that you can support it. And again, there seems to be quite a bit of work that's happened in that regard to get the right unit rates. So it has created, it's a transition year. You always get to have a bit of that happening. I think we would have loved to have seen it being nice reconciliations with a nice ribbon and a bow and say, here's a reconciliation that happened, but that's in the ideal world. So we're having to just rework the way we approach it. Yeah.
Your job will be easier in future years. That's what
I'm hoping so.
Excellent.
Promise.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Clint. Members, do we have any questions for Clint or the team? Is there any comments, questions? All right, we'll start with Member Jenny.
Good morning. Just a few comments. In terms of the revaluation pieces, it's good to hear that all the extra work's happening in that revaluation space, particularly in the context of the water reform piece, and that we're really making sure the numbers are accurate. And I can vouch for the comment about the Wellington region. We're really focusing on the revaluation. There's a lot more complex, a lot more work happening, and it's important work. So good to hear it happening here. I suppose just a few positive comments about the annual report. The workshop we had on the 25th of September was really helpful to sort of go through things and get an overview. I think overall the annual report's looking really well, looking really good. It's a good quality document. It's great to see the savings that were achieved for the year. It's fantastic. It's an excellent result. So overall, there's lots of good stories in there in terms of budget management and savings. Probably the key risk for me is just looking at that net debt to revenue, and I'm sure councillors are well aware of that. That's really red traffic light there, and obviously you're working hard to manage that in the longer term. I couldn't find anything to do with the Standard & Poor's credit rating. Maybe I missed it, but I think it is an important story to tell in the annual report about the rating downgrade as well. So hopefully that's incorporated somewhere. Thank you. But overall, well done to officers. I think it's a really good quality report.
Thank you, Member Jenny. You stole some of my my final highlights. So that's very good to cover those. Though, did you want to talk about the Standard & Poor's credit rating aspect, or Pei-Shan?
I can just mention quickly that it is mentioned in there in the overview. Yeah.
Any other members' questions, comments? Member Sarah.
Yes, I was going to just echo what Jenny said, in particular the budget management. I think that it's been a huge effort, and that certainly elected members should take some comfort that that the staff have actually done a good job in trying to manage that budget and looking after the public funds. I think that's excellent. Yeah, and I think the overall the report's looking very good.
Member Mayor Burney.
Firstly, Clint, I'm sorry I had to write that letter, Clint, but you can imagine the reaction I had when I got told at a meeting, and I thought I needed to respond in some way. And I appreciate, that it's not easy to be able to make a call on that at all. My question is about the revaluations as well. And this might be either of you, in terms of the impact that has on our depreciation figure. This is the end of a year, so it's impacting the annual report. We've already done the budget for the current financial year, and the revaluations are for 2 years. So there doesn't seem to be ever a time that our valuations are current, that we're actually using them to either, so we forecast what our, because depreciation is a big part of our rates, and we're trying to even that out and make it, fully cover that depreciation. So we're in a caught between a rock and a hard place in terms of trying to understand what that impact is, are we?
So in terms, we did present a slide at the last workshop. We're actually doing okay in that realm in regards to the valuations. In terms of what we budgeted, we're roughly in line with what we've budgeted for this year. A couple of things in terms of that impact probably to mention are in relation to the comments around the roading revaluation and the fact that it was only a smaller increase. One of the key reasons for that was within RAM, there are some assets that technically are not ours from an ownership perspective, but we have them in there because they're good to have from an asset management perspective, like, for example, power poles with Electra or other things that are good that we understand are there when we are managing our assets. But in error in previous years, they were included in our valuation, so we've corrected that. And so that is one of the key reasons why for this financial year, that valuation doesn't look as significant because that's been tidied up. And that does also help in terms of that depreciation budget. So overall, Mayor Burney, it's pretty close to where the expected depreciation is pretty close to where we have budgeted for this financial year.
Did follow up? No. Clint.
I was just going to add to Jacinta's point. I think, for this committee, what would be important going forward is that, the revaluation cycle, is, you rightfully say, happens every 3 to 4 years sometimes. This time we've got a 2-year window. Those fair value assessments that happens in the interim period needs to be considered, and how council chooses to adopt that and reflect that in its budgeting process. So, in the intervening years, it's a requirement of the standard that an entity does a fair value assessment. So as it moves, because what happens, and we've seen this, is that you just do an index, you ignore the fair value and say, great, we're within a range, and move on. And then when you get to year 3 and you do the valuation and you see it go like that, and that's when you're going back to rate base. So it's about just managing that risk, having those fair value assessments done early in the piece, even before you get into the budget process for the next year, or setting rates, or whatever that process is. How do you build it into the timetable will be really useful. Then you can make a call in May and say, okay, it's going up by 5%. Can we wait another 3 years? Is that what the signs are? Or do we book it now, get the depreciation, rather than having this massive bump? So just a consideration for this committee.
Jacinta or Paishan, having heard that advice from Clint, do you have a response or reaction to that in terms of how we could build that into our approach?
Yeah, sure, through you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely. We have, if the timing works, absolutely. And when we're doing our budgets, the team, Paishan and her team, regularly look at where that fair value is moving, and we build that into our assumptions for depreciation in our modelling. So absolutely, we will look to where we can. We always do look to where we can. If we think the movement's going to be bigger, then we'll build that in. If it's different than Burl, because often the Burl indices are often a lot lower than what has ended up being the fair value.
Thank you for that. Any final comments, questions, members? Well, I'll just wrap up by saying, thanks again to the team for putting together the annual report. The September workshop was very, very helpful, but the putting together an annual report, obviously looking back, that accountability reporting is really hard to put together and to keep it in a sort of a very engaging and easy to read format, and I thought you've done a really, really good job. There'll always be people that talk about the length and should they be shorter, but I think it's done a really great job in terms of telling our story, particularly celebrating some of those key achievements, and particularly that $1.9 million saving. I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge and celebrate. So thank you to both of your teams in terms of all of your work. Thank you. We will now move into 6.2. So I'd like to invite Jacinta and looks like Lauren. So this is a 6.2 climate change approach. We're taking the report as read, but we'd love you, team, to perhaps just give us a headline or key message that you'd like us to reflect on, and then we'll open up to questions and comments.
Cool, so kia ora koutou, ko Jacinta Toko Ingoa. Thank you for the chance to talk about climate change in this committee. It's very exciting, quite nice to kind of collate a little update on the work that Horowhenua District Council have been doing as of recent. Probably just want to highlight or recognise within the report the new approach within council reports that the democracy team have kind of led and included. So there is a different reporting approach to our climate change updates in those council reports. So yeah, probably just wanted to highlight that before we kick into our discussion.
And just to acknowledge that this is obviously the first time we're receiving a report on this, so this is hopefully going to generate some good discussion. And members, also, if there's further work or further information that you're looking for, it'd be great for you to flag that, and because this is going to be an ongoing journey. So, any comments and questions to start us with? Councillor Proctor, I'm looking at you because yep.
Thanks for the report. It was great to see. It's good to see it in the Risk and Insurance Committee being presented as well. I think it elevates the issue into something more serious. I hope that we can share some of the comments with our wider council group or councillors and assure them that we are working with a range of other organisations around our region. I suppose our regional councils and neighbouring councils are all aligning with them and working together in a more coordinated fashion. So I think that message is lost on some of our councillors.
Any further comments, questions? Well, I might just, while you're reflecting on any comments, questions, I think one of the things that sort of struck me was just to probably that there are a number of things that council are doing that, although they're not primarily a climate change response, they all contribute to part of that global response. And so the good example is water meters was one obviously about water management and water demand management. And so, yeah, look, I think that there's been some really, I think this is just a really good report in terms of prompting that thinking about what we are doing, where the gaps might be, what more we could do. And obviously there are some other initiatives that Council has triggered that are going to help inform and allow for further decisions. And so just to highlight those again to the public, that's around the carbon emissions portal, and then obviously the climate action plan, which is still being developed. But did you have any comment on either of those pieces of work and what you're hoping is going to come out of those?
Yeah, just probably to your point as well, it's like climate change is a really broad approach and we can talk about it in many different means, and I hope that this report kind of reflects that initiative. The exciting news is that the Climate Action Plan is coming to Council via workshop in the next couple of weeks, so we will be presenting that draft document to elected members, and so I look forward to that discussion with you all. And yeah, that kind of is the next step in the process, about pulling all that information together and bringing that approach to one means.
Members, comments, questions? Is there anything in terms of any additional reporting or some deeper dive work or further sort of risk analysis that anyone is particularly seeking or thinking about? Any thoughts? Member Sarah.
Yeah, I think this is a really good document, and I look forward to seeing what the reporting is that comes through in the future. I think the biggest challenge when it's anything like this is to how you can integrate it into your normal everyday operating procedures. So it shouldn't just be something you report on when you have to, but rather that people are thinking about it. So any new initiative, what is the impact? Any new procurement, what is the impact on climate? And I think even looking at the risk register, there's a risk about climate, but it's also probably integrated into every single risk is what is the climate risk, and then you can look at what potentially could be done to mitigate or what might have to be accepted as well. So it is trying to get that integration. That's a good start.
I might just jump in with a question then around, in terms of, we've obviously built a number of existing controls into our district plan, and that's how we manage a number of risks and hazards at the moment through the district plan. And so as we learn more and as we understand risks and hazards more, how do we integrate that with our district plan work program in terms of making sure that we're keeping the district plan relevant and up to date and responsive or are you happy to?
So the challenge with keeping a district plan up to date is that making changes to district plans always triggers a Schedule 1 RMA process, which, as many of you will have experienced, can be quite a drawn out and quite an expensive process. That said, making sure our district plan appropriately recognises natural hazards and has appropriate controls in it is a statutory requirement. So something that does feature within our district plan work program is to check in if anything significant has happened or anything significant has changed, that responding to that through a plan change would be prioritised. What I would say is there are a couple of, safeguards built into the RMA to respond to those sorts of things when new information becomes available, for example, and the district plan hasn't caught up through a process. And an example of that would be contained within Section 106 of the Resource Management Act, which applies to subdivision. One of the grounds for refusing a subdivision in any circumstances, even if it's provided for in the district plan, is if that subdivision were to be at significant risk of natural hazard. So if, for example, we had a significant weather event and we learned that a part of our district was very vulnerable to a hazard and we hadn't perhaps previously recognised that in the district plan, and then 3 months on someone came in with a subdivision proposal, we would have the grounds to refuse that even if there wasn't a specific rule in the district plan that allowed that to happen. So it's finding that right balance between appropriately monitoring the information as it comes in and building that into the district plan work program, but also knowing that we have these safeguards built into the RMA to protect us from those sorts of circumstances.
Thank you for that overview. That's really, really helpful. And knowing where we're at in terms of our current district plan work program and what we're focusing on, I'm sure there's even the update of the definitions, that's going to be some small benefits and small focus there.
That's right. And of course, when we bring forward greenfield rezonings, for example, all those sorts of, district plan changes that might be more focused on enabling development than on protecting from hazards, of course, a key part of deciding to move forward with an enabling district plan change is to understand what the hazard risk is and what the climate change impact and vulnerability might be.
Just one final question, unless there's no one's jumping. We obviously have a section in our normal council reports that talk about have a climate change section, and I just wondered if you could talk us through kind of the process of how we develop that and who's having input into that. Is it something that we need to think about more in terms of making sure that we are having that really clear climate change risk lens in terms of the decision making that we're enabling through those council reports.
I'm looking across the table at Grayson because I know that their team did develop those, so I'm happy for you to touch on those. But yeah, as always, our team are open, and we do work quite closely with teams within the organisation when they are coming to council reports, and we are always available to talk to them when we're inputting. But yeah, we are on a journey with that new format. So, but Grayson, do you want to touch on those?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we've recently updated the guidance to staff when completing reports, and there's a stronger climate change section in there where we are expecting officers to clearly identify where climate change implications are triggered by some of the decisions. As the council's climate change policies and programs develop further, we'll include more guidance in there. We'll be asking officers to liaise with Jacinta around some of those, so we make sure that in each report where a significant decision is being made, that there's a clear understanding of what the climate change implications are and what mitigations may be in place. As this is literally only just come off the press, so it's an ongoing process of improvements that we're looking to do. Thank you, Grayson. I appreciate that update. That's very useful. All right, team. I think unless there's any questions, I'm not seeing any hands or lights. Just final question then, though, to members is: are we comfortable with where this report's given us an overview, or is there any further work or reporting that you're looking for the next meeting? Or would you prefer to reflect on this and then direct any questions or comments through me as chair, and then we can engage with the team if you want to reflect on what it is that we might be looking for on a sort of ongoing basis? So, comments now or comments later is the sort of decision. Later. Okay. Thank you, team. Really appreciate it. Yeah, high quality report. Very useful. Thank you very much. Invite Ashley up for the next one. So this is 6.3, which is Introduction to Protected Disclosure, Protection of Whistleblowers Act 2022. Ashley, this is obviously an important sort of control mechanism that we have in place. Any key messages or headlines for us?
I will take the report as read and happy to answer any questions.
Any comments or questions from members? It appears that everyone is very comfortable, and so again, we thank you for your work. We have assurance that. Sorry, Mayor Bernie.
I did have a question. Sorry, Ashley. Who is the arbitrator? I assume it's the chief executive, is it, in terms of who decides, whether a disclosure, should be received?
So, all potential disclosures need to be taken as that they are a real accurate item or issue that has happened. They are to be disclosed to many different people, so the person doesn't have to necessarily just go to the chief executive. They can disclose to you, they can disclose to a senior manager or someone within people and capability. They can disclose to the chief executive or a number of other organisations such as police, Auditor General, Ombudsman, Serious Fraud Office. No matter who they do disclose to, they will always go back to Chief Executive and the Mayor. So Council and Chief Executive will always be aware of those disclosures. They may not be that first point of disclosure. Then there are steps that we undertake, which is around acknowledgement of the receipt of the complaint. Then there's an interview with the complainant, so that's where they figure out what's actually happening. Is this a legitimate complaint? And then the investigation is undertaken for every request that comes through. And so through that investigation point, they understand how serious this may or may not be, and look into it in further details. Those three processes need to have happened within the first 20 days. If they are going to take longer than 20 days, then the the complainant needs to be made aware of that, and they need to be let know how long that process may take. But there are multiple places that you can disclose to, but it will always come back to the CE and the mayor to be made aware of.
I suppose I'm asking, is it the mayor and the chief executive then decide whether the disclosure has the credibility to advance it? Because that's an internal sort of decision that, you know, may not necessarily meet the demands of the person that is disclosing the information.
So not necessarily. So depending on what that issue or matter is, there may be externals brought in to do that investigation to understand if that credibility is there. Yeah. Or different parts of the business, depending on what that item or issue is.
Any further questions, comments? Actually, I think, and so the key takeaway is that obviously the current council policy is scheduled for a review in the current financial year. That will reflect on any of the 2022 changes, legislative changes, and then there'll be training delivered to staff in terms of any changes to the policy. Is that?
That's correct. On review of the policy that we currently have, there will be minor changes, very minor changes made.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the report. We're going well. We are moving. I don't want our time pressure to mean that members feel like they can't make comments or discuss things. We want to have some robust conversations. So we are doing well for time. We're now moving to 6.4 Treasury update. Invite Peishan back to the table. Plenty in this report for us to reflect on, but I'll hand over to you. Just anything you want to headline or direct our particular attention to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this report is to provide a treasury update to the committee. Some key points to note is we completed 30 million forward start swaps for the September quarter. So this is done at an interest rate ranging from 3.4 to 3.51%, which is a very, very good deal. So with the recent OCR announcement, with basis points dropping and all that, we're working closely with our treasury advisor to see whether we can make use of some of that favorable interest rate. So this interest forecast will be presented in the organisation performance report that will be presented to the council for 30th of October meeting. So we're working on revising that. Our net debt to revenue ratio, I think Member Jenny mentioned that we are closely monitoring that ratio, making sure that we're still staying within our limit of 250%. We also have planned to pre-fund our 2026 debt maturities. That totals to about 38 million, and we plan to do this in the 2025 year. So those are the highlights. Take questions. Thank you.
And so before I hand over to members for questions, I'm presuming that the magic is finding the right moment in terms of following what's happening with interest rates, but also having that long-term certainty in terms of locking in that funding.
Yes, you're right, Mr. Chair. Yes.
Questions, comments from members? Evan?
Peishan, I was interested in that comment around that we need to lengthen our debt profile, if you like, that a lot of it is concentrated obviously over the next 2 or 3 years. There's probably no ideal time, but especially at the moment with, the forecast reduction in interest rates even next month by the sound of it. But what is the sort of, how should we balance that length of debt?
That is a very good question, Mayor Bunny. We do have very concentrated maturity in the next 3 to 4 years, and so working with our treasury advisor is to understand whether that will still stay within our treasury management policy in terms of going too far out or not enough. The main thing is getting the split of floating and fixed right as well, and definitely making use of the interest rates where we can. So a lot of this is guided by the bank or our treasury advisor in terms, because they are more closely updated on how the market is moving and all that. So we work closely with them to make sure that they give us the timely advice. So, for example, for this financial year, there's a plan of borrowing another 7 million just to make sure we can cover the projects that we're doing. And so, with that in mind, that piece of information, Bancorp is well aware. So, but when the time is right, they will approach and say, this is the right time. We'll do this, and then we'll assess to see whether that will fit within our policy.
I suppose having forecast a deficit in our budget, at some stage we're going to have to. Does that include that in that $7 million? Because we have to cover that somehow, don't we?
Yeah, that 7 million is planned for as part of setting the long-term plan.
Yeah.
I might just mention one quick thing. So you see in the forecast there, it says that we're going to spend significantly more. Peishan, just in terms of the work with the OCR dropping by 50 basis points, Peishan's done some great work in terms of modelling and getting more specific with the modelling on each part. That's now coming down to probably within the range of 300,000 over. We're then looking at some options currently at the moment to take on some more swaps as an option, so that we are in line with budget but still within our range of fixed versus floating. So we have brought that down significantly since the writing of this report, but just to flag that it's an ongoing piece of work to make sure that we can get some clarity on the cash flow that's needed over the next couple of years.
So can you just remind me then? So obviously paragraph 6 talks about cost of borrowing being 4.55%. What's our significant forecasting assumption in the long-term plan? Do you remember off the top of your head? And do we track that? Do we track that against that, or do we? Yeah.
If you're meaning the budgeted interest rate level for this year that we put in the long-term plan, I believe it's about 4.1 or 4.2%.
Just to flag one item that's probably a little that we need to monitor closely. It's coming to this. It will come to the council committee in terms of the revisiting the capital program and some proposals to shift some projects around. One is yes, making sure we are still within looking at our debt, our capital requirements, and our grants, the net position or the net impact of debt. But also we have some CIP grants which are interest free, and there is a potential that some of that interest-free loan funding might move to next year. So in terms of our interest rate, that is a pressure for us for this financial year, because in our budget we've assumed, as was planned, that we would have that zero interest loan funding this year. So that is a pressure point that we need to also monitor closely.
Any further comments, questions? Member Jenny.
Just a comment, I was concerned about that paragraph 6, where it's showing a forecast overspend in interest costs, $8.3 million compared to $7.6 million. And it's good to hear that there's some more detailed work that's happened around that. I suppose in the broader context of trying to manage risks and budget overspends, it's really important that there's a real sharp eye on that interest cost of funds. And from memory, in the annual report for the last year, there was also an net overspend in interest costs. So it's great to hear the OCR is coming down, and hopefully the government helps us with some more changes in the right direction. But I suppose just managing that risk around overspend, that 4.1% assumption in the LTP seems low to me. So I expect it's going to be quite a challenge to manage this year, and maybe there just needs to be a sharpening up of the assumptions and the focus when you're setting your annual plan budgets for the next year around that interest cost assumptions, because it's big numbers now. You've got big levels of debt, and it's definitely a key risk you need to manage. So yeah, that's just what I'm thinking about. Thanks.
Yeah, just picking up on this line of inquiry from Member Jenny. Because council has a decision coming up around whether we do an annual plan next year or not, or an LTP amendment, but just put that to one side. So if we don't do that annual plan, then presumably that significant forecasting assumption at the 4.1 continues through into the next financial year. So how do we manage that from a
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's a different rate in each year. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what year 2 is. But when we are looking at the annual plan and the conversation coming up to the council next week around the annual plan, we are looking at interest and revising it based on the new state in terms of where interest rates are and our capital program sits relative to where the CIP zero interest loans sit and where all those different grants sit as well to make sure that that mix is right. You're right, Member Jenny, in terms of that interest projection was pretty tight and took into account getting interest-free loans and it probably didn't have any buffer in it. So there is a potential that going forward we probably should allow a little bit of buffer in there.
any further questions, follow-ups? Payshan, anything you wanted to follow up with based on what you've heard? No. All right. I do think we have just a resolution to a recommendation to deal with. So I'll move that the committee notes the Bancorp Treasury reporting dashboard for the September 2024 quarter. If I could have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Young. All in favour? Any against? No. Excellent. Thank you, Payshan, for that one. We will move on to 6.5, which is also you, and this relates to Local Government Funding Authority update. I think all of the key information for us in terms of our decision making today is in Appendix E, which is page 398, but any headlines or further commentary that you'd like to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as part of the LGFA updates, LGFA has provided a statement of intent for the next 3 years. Their annual report for 2023-24, they are also included in the report. The main point is the increase in base lending margin by 5 basis points to 25 basis points from LGFA, and also the increase to borrower notes percentage to 5%. I think they're currently sitting at about 3.5. So they will take effect from 1st July 2024. The increase in base lending margin is mainly related to the need for LGFA to grow their capital and retain earnings. And the other matter is Horowhenua District Council, being a shareholder of LGFA, we've been invited to attend their AGM held on the 19th of November in Wellington. So this paper also seeks endorsement from the committee to follow recommendations from LGFA Shareholders Councils for all the 5 resolutions listed in the paper. We also seek delegation from the committee to Group Manager, Organisation Performance and Financial Controller to complete the proxy form and exercise Council's voting rights at the AGM. That's everything that I have in terms of the main highlights. Take questions.
Members, any questions or comments? Yeah, Bernie.
Thanks, Payshan. Just curious around the decision by the LGFA board to increase their margin. Does that have any impact on our borrowing ability, or even our, what we're getting back from them in terms of a dividend?
So through Mr. Chair, it will increase our interest costs.
Yeah.
And that allows them to make sure that they're meeting what they need to do. It may change our dividends a little bit, but it's not a significant item. But yes, there is some impact for us in terms of future borrowing.
Yeah. Because the other thing I was curious about was the fact that there's been and this is not us, but across the sector, there's been a 25% increase in borrowing in 1 year. Over $4 billion. I mean, we can't sustain that sort of carry on for too much longer, I think. I would have thought. And with Local Water done well, sort of now basically increasing the ability of, say, CCOs to, what we're doing is putting this country into massive debt.
So Andrew Meikle from LGFA did come out and visit recently, and LGFA is going as well through a big change with when new entities come on, new water entities come on, they'll also be borrowing to them as well. So yes, there is significant increase in debt for that wider sector, but also specifically for LGFA.
Just to pick up on that line of inquiry then, and also it's relevant to the previous agenda item, is the intent that for Three Waters related assets, that the borrowing rate will be lower, or will be just exactly what we're assuming, so our assumptions will remain valid? Because the one thing that the Three Waters proposals flagged was that there might be higher debt to revenue ratios permitted, but what's the indication around the actual cost of borrowing for Three Waters related?
I can maybe help there. As I understand it, the way it'll be set up is that the councils will provide guarantees to the water CCOs, and then the cost of borrowings for those water CCOs will be the same as the council, so there won't be any higher margin as such. So the CCOs will be able to, get that benefits of reduced cost of fundings, and the work that LGFA does across the sector and goes out internationally to issue debt and so on. They'll be able to capture that interest costs at a CCO level.
So depending on the model that a council chooses, does that mean that the entity will have its own credit rating, but it will be heavily influenced by the credit rating of the potentially controlling council or the council involved? Is that?
So each entity will be assessed separately. So the water CCO would get a credit rating, and they're trying to make sure, initially, potentially the CCOs will have a lot of debt and a lot of catch up of works to undertake, so and may not have the revenue, may need to grow the revenue over a longer time. So the credit rating initially may be on the weaker end, but aiming to get it to reasonable over a period of time. In terms of the council impact of the credit rating settings, because there's a guarantee across the CCO, and it depends on the arrangement. If you're a council with a CCO with lots of other shareholding councils, so you're sort of spreading the risk. They call it, it's a contingent liability assessment by Standard & Poor's, and there's probably going to be a lower impact on the council and their credit rating. But if you're a council that's just got 100% shareholding, for example, with the CCO, the impact on your credit rating is probably going to be higher, more riskier, unfavourable impact potentially. But it is complicated. It's early days with legislation and so on, and exactly where everything's going to land. Yeah, that's how I understand the S&P aspects at this point in time.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Any further comments, questions? Actually, I'll pitch it this way. So page 315 has the recommendations from the LGFA Shareholders Council. Has anyone got any concerns about any of those recommendations? Me, Bernie.
Well, I wonder whether we should support Wellington City Council being back on the LGFA if they're understanding their current issues.
That's a bit awkward.
I'd just say I think they've got a very experienced treasurer working there.
All right, well, if there's no further questions or comments, what I'll do is I'll take us back to page 313, and I'm going to move on block C, D, E, F, and G. Do I need to read those out, Grayson, or that's fine? So I'll move all of those. If I could have a seconder for those. Thank you, Member Jenny. And all in favour? Any against? Fantastic. Looks like we have dealt with that item, 6.5. Thank you. Thanks, Pesha. We will move to 6.6. Now, this is our risk management quarterly report. Invite Catherine up to the table. This is Catherine's first time presenting to the committee, so we're going to be very nice and keep all the hard questions for right at the end. So, no, look, I just want to spend a little bit of time on this report because I kind of want to acknowledge Council's ongoing maturity in this risk space, and that obviously started with Ashley, and Rob has done a huge amount of work, and now Catherine, your work and impact is immediately obvious in terms of the reporting, and so just to acknowledge the full team for all of this, all the work, feel a huge amount of confidence that we are really we're really strengthening and really getting a clear handle in terms of that risk management. So love the new dashboard. I'll invite you just to give us a bit of an overview, headlines, anything you'd like to say, and then I'll hand over to questions.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'll say it's a pleasure to be here. So just for my headlines, I'll take my report as read, and you'll see in there that we have commenced work on our legal compliance work with Comply With, and our work with our business continuity plan has also commenced. And then if I can just refer you to page 413, and that is our new strategic risk register format. So that will change and evolve over time as we add additional information to it. Yes.
Members, we're going to start with the, I'll just invite questions or comments on the strategic risk register and just your reaction to it, whether it's meeting your needs. Certainly my reaction to it was really, really positive, but yeah, actually just...
Sort of add one thing.
Yeah, go for it. Sorry, I jumped into it.
No, I just had a mind wave. One of the things that Catherine was saying is this will evolve. One of the things that we want to include in the next report is where it says current update, which you can see on each risk, we will have another box which will talk about specifically the actions that we're going to do, which was things that have feedback that you've given us in a couple of sessions we've now had. So that is destined for the next report. You will see each of the risks that come through will have identified actions and when those are going to take place. The following report, if the risk still comes through, you will see what we've done and then any further actions.
So, members, we'll just invite you open to provide any feedback, any commentary, any on specifically on the report, and then we might get into some of the risks if people are so minded. Member Jenny.
I'll just say that I love it. Well done. It's great to see this. It's nice, high level. I think don't add too much detail in, some of the actions and stuff may add too much depth. It's actually really great that it's lifted up in strategic and high level and really value, the thought that's gone into the preparation. And generally I felt, reading through all the controls and that they felt appropriate. There wasn't any big red flags for me. It looked like it was really good work. Thank you.
And just quickly for me, again, I'd echo the same sort of words. I really like the layout and that, but also you can actually go a bit further into the depth to see, and then obviously the current update I think will be very useful as we move forward too. So well done, it's great work.
I had Member Jenny, Member Sarah, and then Jonathan.
Look, I think it's a big improvement as well, and what I really like is that I've been harping on about it, is that the risk description is much tighter. It actually talks about what the risks are, whereas before we just had the headlines and I didn't really get what the risks actually were. I think some of the control elements are good, and I'm looking forward, as you've mentioned, Ashley, to seeing what some of these actions are. And I think that's probably a place just to challenge some of the thinking on those actions as well. You can get quite sort of immersed in what you know, but it's actually, I think it's an opportunity for you to stand back and go, well, actually, have you thought about? So, well done.
Same as well. I mean, I read heaps of risk assessments and risk reports, and this is one of the best I've seen, and clearest and easiest to follow. In terms of specific questions, I'm allowed to go there.
Yeah, jump into it. Go for it.
I have a fundamental sort of different view than our chair on this and O2NL, and wonder if our risk assessment around O2NL should change a little bit due to tolling and some of the impacts maybe on legacy outcomes for that project as well. But everything's good. Thanks.
Yeah, I might add on to that question, because I had actually reflected on that obviously the O2NL risk is in the low range, and with the tolling topic at the moment, and also the potential for de-scoping of the project, obviously financial constraints, potential delay, I just wondered, was that having any influence in terms of potentially peaking it? And I think Councillor Proctor was talking about also the additional impact of decisions potentially for local road network, revocation of the old highway, that kind of stuff. Does that sort of factor in terms of this current assessment, or is there potentially some further reflection that might be happening?
Thank you, Chair. Risk is always evolving, and what I think we'll do in this case is hand over to David, because the risk does lie with David.
Mr. McCorkindale.
Thank you. The risk here has been one which is, I guess, been capturing the impact and risk of the organisation being able to play its part in the project, which is a little bit different to the angle which you picked up from the commentary just now, which is a bit more around what the project actually delivers or the impact the project then has on the community and things. So two slightly different ones. Obviously we can consider that going forward in terms of, as it continues to evolve, does that sort of emerge as a strategic risk, which is a bit different to this one here, which has been more around the internal risk of our ability to contribute and participate.
Having heard the discussion then, I think, so this risk that's captured in the risk register is about our role in relation to O2NL. And so by show of sort of nods, is the committee keen to perhaps see some further thinking around just the O2NL topic more broadly as a strategic risk? Councillor Olsen.
Yeah, look, 100%. But I think we probably, as mentioned, it is going to evolve as we progress. I mean, we talk about tolling. Well, it's not set in concrete yet as such. So I guess we have to be a little bit agile here as we move forward around some of this. Like, yeah, if you know what I mean. Like it's time will probably show a bit more clearer as far as what the outcome will be.
Are people comfortable with that approach? And I think the team have heard that feedback anyway. So, are they comfortable with that approach? Okay. Any further risks on the register that anyone wants to talk about, jump into? I've got a few questions, but I'll let others go first. No. Mayor Bernie, you look like you're going for the button.
Well, I did. I suppose the couple of comments first. It's interesting to see that our top three risks are actually not infrastructure or anything like that. It's about the business and everything that we do. My concern is more a bit like O2NL. The impacts for local water is done well. I think for the next 12 months or so will be particularly high risk because of the impacts are so uncertain at the moment, and what could happen to our ratepayers as a result of decisions that we make around this table could have significant impact. So, yeah, I'd like to see a bit more emphasis placed on. I think that is significant risk.
Yeah, so essentially the request, if we're framing that up, is perhaps some more thinking about how we are doing risk planning around, because I know that we are doing risk planning, but maybe it's just, is it talking about what we are doing in relation to Three Waters and perhaps to O2NL? Like what does good look like in terms of reporting or information back to the committee look like? Me, Bernie, what would you like to see?
Yeah, and that's probably like all the risks, that transition from where we've been and where we're going is hard to sometimes be able to specify in a report that's, at the moment, but some sort of understanding of how that is travelling, would be useful, I think, in terms of, and I know the arrows are very useful in terms of, the up or down and things like that, it does. But, for instance, that the Three Waters one is actually gone down slightly, hasn't it?
Moderate.
Yeah. And whereas I see that because of the travel of the conversation that we're having, the risk is actually, increasing as we transition to getting closer to making a decision. And that's where it becomes quite critical, I think. OTNL is a long project, whereas we're being pressured quite significantly around local water done well to actually have made a decision pretty much by Christmas before we go to consultation. So, those sorts of things, I'd like to see some sort of understanding, I suppose, of the path of travel.
Acknowledging that, Mayor Burney, team, because obviously as we come into Three Waters decision making, there'll also be more a risk analysis around each of the options that we will be previewed. But did you have any comment or response to Mayor Burney? Did you want to cover that up? Or did you have something relevant to this conversation?
Yeah, I guess jump in off his comment. I mean, I understand what Mayor Burney's saying, but it's always hard to incorporate uncertainty into this risk process, because what you're asking is about uncertainty with the decisions and the way that we go through that process to come to a decision at the end of the day. And so, I mean, my thoughts would be in the treatment and control, maybe that can be expanded a little bit to highlight the economic modelling that we're doing and maybe the engagement process that we are trying to undertake. Well, we haven't decided on an engagement process yet, have we? No. Maybe that should be in the risk. But I think we are doing a lot of work around the economic modelling of various options, and there's a workshop today, isn't there? And I think maybe that just needs to be listed under the treatment and controls.
Or perhaps, if I can offer, that might be more under the actions that are coming. So we can actually see what's going to be done by when, and then you can assess what the risk is on those outcomes that are coming through as well.
Yeah, because the uncertainty increases the risk almost for me. And also, I'm also concerned around when we do consult, if the public don't agree with what we've necessarily come up with as an answer, then the risk is even greater. That, and we have to deliver this implementation plan by June 30th, basically.
Team, having heard the discussion, do you want to reflect back your current thinking or what you might take away, or do you want to just take a note of it, reflect on it, and come back with next steps?
Yes, thank you. It's all been noted, most definitely. I think what I can say is that we are probably in good hands, given that our previous risk manager is currently the risk owner of this risk. But no, we can definitely come back to the next committee with more information surrounding this risk for you.
It may be that as part of our ongoing discussion around the Three Waters, that we are making sure that we're looping in the key risk people into to hear some of that elected member discussion and decision making as well, or direction setting, because I think that will then allow that us to have those sort of discussions and also ask those questions in between meetings, of acknowledging obviously that our next committee meeting's not until February next year. Do you want to jump in, Cinta, and then I've got Jonathan?
Just one quick comment as well is for Member Jenny and Sarah, is probably that internally that we make you aware of any workshops that we are having in that water space in terms of the future of water, so that if you'd like to attend as well, that you're welcome to at any point.
Just an additional point to note, earlier in the meeting, Jacinta and Grayson were giving you an update around the new report template. So that report template has a greater version of a risk update. So you'll now see greater reporting coming through on each of the reports in relation to risk. And so I think some of the information that you were speaking of, Mayor Burney, will be coming through in those reports and the reports that come through from Daniel and Rob in relation to local waters.
Good. I'm just going to make a joke about burn mowing and risks.
Yeah, we're not going near burn mowing. Thanks.
Just wondering whether or not there is any forum that actually looks at key projects that are part of a long-term plan and sort of a deep dive into the risks of that sort of thing. I just wasn't sure where that might come in.
We tend to do that we have a capital project steering committee, and then there are other sort of smaller groups in terms of things like Live in Town Centre and but I'm not sure if we've integrated a full sort of risk lens into that space, but that's something that I'm sure we can start to roll out. Yeah.
So one last one I just mentioned is across the organisation to make sure that all of our legal claims and insurance claims are managed well as well. Catherine is now taking a central role in terms of facilitation of all of those, just so that there is that oversight from a risk perspective of anything that's happening in both of those spaces. And I think that's already proving to be helpful.
Correct to hear. And so actually just on one of the risks in the table is the risk pool one, and I know we've had lots of information about this in the past, but the question I had was around, do we actually have anything in our, like a contingent liability number captured in our budgets or anything like that at the moment around this?
No, anything that we did have has been paid, so there's nothing that we're aware of that we're liable for at this stage.
Any final questions, comments on any of the risks? Looks like we're comfortable. Hey, thanks very much for the presentation and the engaging conversation. Obviously, this will continue to be a key focus for the committee and having these really good conversations around risk. So thank you for your work. Thank you, Ashley. Much appreciated. All right, we'll move then on to item 6.7, which is our continuous improvement and audits action and monitoring report. Peishan is back in the seat. We're taking the report as read. We do have one resolution at the end, which we'll deal with. So I guess the question is, any headlines, anything that we're particularly concerned about, or are we largely on track?
Thank you, Chair. We are largely on track. That report gives an update of the progress that we've made. We managed to close off or to complete a couple more recommendations between the reporting period from last time to this time. So that's good news. And as you know, our annual audit is still in progress. And so we expect to hear from Audit New Zealand, the latest audit management letter. And then when we receive that, we're hoping that we don't have a whole lot more to be added on. So because we have been working through a lot of the recommendations from them from previous years, with 8 outstanding recommendations that we're still working on. And so hopefully as part of this audit, they will take off a lot of them and then we can archive. Thank you.
That is fantastic to hear. Any questions, comments on any of the detail in the table? Member Jenny, looks like
positive feedback today. It's just amazing to see the progress over the last 2 years. We're really nailing and sorting out all the improvement things. So huge big well done.
Peishan, looking like the committee's very happy and very assured as to how we're tracking. So thank you very much. Oh, we do have that one resolution that I need to deal with. So that is page 431. So I'll move that the Risk and Assurance Committee notes the Risk and Assurance Committee resolution and actions monitoring report in attachment A. If I could have a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Olsen. All in favour? Any against? Fantastic. We are moving well. All right, we're moving then on to item 6.8, which is our Risk and Assurance Committee work program. Jacinta's in the seat for that. Take the report as read. Obviously, our next meeting is in February of next year. I've talked to the team about what we're intending to bring for that meeting, but are there any further comments, requests, concerns?
May I just make one?
Oh, Jacinta, jump in.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. I guess in terms of the program, there's a few options. We've got Miles in terms of Treasury update can come and give an update, so I've listed him in there for February. On the other side, when I spoke to Andrew Meikle from LGFA, he also offered to come in. He does a lot on behalf of LGFA, does a lot of the analysis of councils from a risk perspective. So that he was one that I thought would be quite useful for the committee to hear from, because he's an independent, our independent borrower who does the analysis of where he thinks we sit. So some advice from him I thought would be useful.
I'm seeing nodding heads, so let's lock that in. Yep.
So if the timing doesn't work for that one, then we'll definitely have it on the following. So just wanted to check in with you on those. Those are probably the two main ones I wanted to ask about.
Is there anything on the program that that we're worried about in terms of putting too much pressure on the organisation to get that sorted, or are we pretty much on track, comfortable where we're sitting?
Thanks. I think we're on track. It's just a question of whether there's anything else that you would like to have some conversations about or independent views on that we haven't captured in this.
And look, if you haven't got any thoughts today, feel free to connect those through to me, and I can talk about that with the team. That's the good thing about being the chair, is we can add additional things onto the agenda later. So, but unless there's any comments or questions, we'll keep moving. No? Excellent. Do we have a resolution there? Yes. So I'll move that the Risk and Assurance Committee supports the proposed Risk and Assurance Committee work program for 24-25. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Young. All in favour? Any against? Excellent. We will then move to 6.9 and invite Tanya to the table. So this is our Health, Safety and Wellbeing Dashboard quarterly report. And while you're taking your seat, Tanya, I just need to say what excellent performance is being noted in the report. And so, again, plaudits to you and the team for your commitment to our performance in this area. And I know it is a team effort, but again, just celebrating the performance and your leadership on this. So thank you very much. Over to you to headline anything that you'd like to particularly draw our attention to.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. So, yes, I agree. We had a really good quarter. We've been discussing this across the organisation, ensuring that our reviews are done in time, that those conversations are being had, engagement in health, safety and wellbeing across teams, and that information is coming back into the team to be able to report on. So that's been really a fantastic quarter we've had. You may have noticed that the report has changed slightly. We are using a new reporting tool that will allow us to dive deeper into the information we put in. On the front page there is the balance scorecard. The arrows that show up, down and across are all sitting at 0. That is because we haven't quite been able to get that bit of information of our movement over this quarter for this meeting. So that will be updated and regularly change as it has done previously. So they are just showing that at 0 at the moment. The contractor health and safety reporting September is missing from the quarter's report because we weren't able to get the information from our contractors in time for the report deadline for this RAC meeting. And the last thing I wanted to highlight was the 2 new pages at the back, which was showed on the cover information for the report around emergency situation preparedness. So that allows us to monitor our duress alarm responses or planned trials, emergency evacuations and lockdowns, and then also our critical risk reporting, so starting that link from all our incident reports and linking them to our critical risks. On that part, the critical risks, we did have one WorkSafe notification you will see on the critical risk reporting, and that was really due to the severe injury that happened to the member of the public. It was reviewed and investigated. It was not a workplace situation that caused the injury. It was an accident, but because of the multiple injuries the person received. We did report it through to WorkSafe. They've come back with some communication, but have taken it no further at this point. But it's important that you're aware this did occur. So it's something we're monitoring closely.
Thank you very much for that overview. That's very, very helpful. Comments, questions, anything? No? Councillor Proctor.
Reports look good and are easy to follow, so that's great. Thanks.
Appears the committee is very assured of what's happening, and again, it looks like we are tracking very well, and the level of information is very insightful, and I feel like we have a really good handle on what's happening and where we're managing that risk. So, just one final check. No further questions, comments. Thank you very, very much. Much appreciated. Sorry, team. My push for us to be timely today has obviously have meant we've shot through this very, very quickly. But we'll move now to 6.10, which is our internal audit work program for 24-25. We'll invite Ashley. Looks like we've got Nikki. Oh no, you're going to do that. Okay, excellent. Thanks, Jacinta. So we'll take the report as read. I'll just add a quick commentary, which is obviously there's a real focus here on where we know that we've got some issues, and we're going to put the attention and budget towards fixing those things. And so I'll hand over to you then just to speak to any headlines.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks. So yeah, absolutely what Councillor Jennings said. So that it's in November is fraud awareness. There's fraud awareness week, so we're going to take that opportunity to make sure there's a upskilling in the organisation and awareness around fraud and where the council sits. So that's part of standard risk approach. Then in terms of tax, we've continued that relationship with PwC in terms of the cycle of what we review, and PAYE is the focus for the next one. And then as well in terms of IT security. So the key one in that IT security is making sure that we're spending that money to focus and improve rather than continually auditing and not actually focusing on the improvement side. And Nikki and Christian, when we get into the public excluded portion, we'll talk about some of the work that's happening in the wider IT environment some more.
Any comments, questions? I'm certainly comfortable with what's being proposed. It appears the committee is also comfortable.
Could I just ask one question? So it's probably directed more to Jacinta. The IT security assessment, is that also going to be access approvals and access management systems as well as part of that?
Yeah, so I think the team will touch on that when they talk about it, but there's been an identity and access management review completed, and there's a lot of work planned in that space as well. Yeah.
All right. Well, if there's no further comments or questions on item 6.10, we will. We've just got one resolution there, so I'll move that the Risk and Assurance Committee endorse the internal audit work program for 24-25. Could I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Young. All in favour? Any against? Oh, excellent. All right. So what the plan from here is, we've done really, really well with time. Sorry if I have constrained some of the conversation by rushing, but we are going to move into public excluded. We've got Nikki and Christian, and then we're going to come out of public excluded and deal with an emergency management presentation. So we've done very well for time, so we're going to fit the full agenda in. So I will move then that we go into public excluded on the basis of section 48(1)(a) of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act. I'll get a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Young. All in favour? Any against? Super. what we need to do there. Do you need me to repeat that on the live stream? All right, so just confirming that we have come out of public excluded, and we are now going to have a presentation from Brent and Ross. And so Councillor Brannigan is wearing his emergency management hat this afternoon. And gents, you've got about 20 minutes to talk to us all things about, well, not all things, but things about emergency management. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings. Obviously, this was a request of the Risk and Assurance Committee to come back and provide a bit more, bit of a deeper dive into civil defence emergency management. So we're here today. We're just waiting for the presentation to pop up to deliver a presentation. It'll go through everything from our structures, how we operate, and to talking around potentially future provision and our teams and some training and exercising. So Ross will be probably leading the presentation, and we'll just wait for it to pop on.
And so, Brent, just to, I guess, just set the scene a little bit. Obviously, we've had a really good report today in our committee agenda around climate change and the obviously responding to emergencies and different things as a piece of that puzzle. But also, the council team are doing a considerable amount of work around BCP and business continuity. And so this is, again, a part of the overall picture of how we deal with emergencies and respond to those hazards. So thanks. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ham, and thanks, guys, for having us on this morning, or this afternoon. It's been a long morning for you already, so I think we've got about 20 minutes, so we'll get through. These first slides I'll get through pretty quick because they're really just taken out of the training package that we use across the country. And this, what the significance of this slide is, it simply is that civil defence is a structure to manage emergencies. It's not actually a thing. It's not actually a standalone organisation like a lot of people think it is. It's a structure that we work within, and you'll see from on the left of the slide, government, local councils to civil defence professionals, and the four pillars there all make up that civil defence role. So everybody's actually got a role to play in civil defence, but it's led by councils, and that's where we all come in. Emergency management is a statutory requirement of a council to lead, to have preparations in place, to have things like emergency operations centres and trained staff. And under the CDM Act 2002, we have to, under those statutory obligations or requirements, be at certain levels. And that's what we'll talk to you a little bit about today. Again, I reiterate to staff when we do training or exercising, etc., that it's just civil defence is another core council function, like some of the other statutory requirements we do and have in the organisation. This is just another one of those, but you could argue it's probably one of the most important ones, but the one we probably least talk about because we only get involved in it every now and then, or most of us only get involved in it every now and then. But the message is clearly it's a statutory responsibility of council, and this council has for a long time taken that pretty seriously, which is great.
And so, Ross, does that mean there's a sort of a blend between experts such as yourself, as well as other people across the organisation that can sort of have the dual roles, so they have their normal day job, but then they can step into these roles? Yeah. And so there's
So most people within our organisation are dual roles, so they're trained with some civil defence training, and in an event they would come in and put that hat on and be in here as part of the response.
Most councils, all councils around the country, there's always your professionals, one or two in most councils, and then obviously supported by staff because it is a team effort. Someone's got to lead it, but it's the people in behind and the strength of the people in behind and the training exercising we do that makes that all come together. But not only that, but the relationships and networks outside this building, which are more than important.
So does that mean also that delegations and powers that sit with those staff, are they delegated to a position rather than a named person, or how does that work? Oh, you're going to come. Sorry.
Any questions? Just give them to us.
I'll let you present and then.
That's cool.
Sorry.
That's good. Very quickly, New Zealand civil defence structure, territorial local authority being local councils, who each have a, like I just said, under the CDM legislation, that statutory requirement to be ready, basically. Supported by the Group Emergency Management Office, usually at a regional council. So for our region, Horizons Regional Council, is the Manawatu Wanganui CDM Group. They administer the group and they have a coordination role across the 7 other councils within this region and largely across the country. And then on top of that, supported by the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. And I've got to say that the relationships, even at our level, at the local level, with NEMA now are far stronger than they ever have been. So better now than probably ever. It's just something that's evolved over the years. A lot more one-to-one within NEMA rather than used to have to the old structure was we had to go through group for everything to do with NEMA. We couldn't approach NEMA ourselves, but now we can. We just have those open relationships, which is works a hell of a lot better than it ever used to. And then that makes up that makes up the CDM group, and you see in the blue bubble there, the partners and stakeholders, which I've just referred to, and you'll see a little bit more of that shortly. The importance of those. So while it looks a simple structure, there's a massive amount of resource and power behind that group when it comes to emergencies. It's our Manawatu Wanganui group. Well, CDM groups in the country are based on the regional council boundaries by and large, and there is a couple of differences that we might talk to if we've got time as we go through. Top of that Jen has us regionally here. I've just a rider on this one. I've just realised looking through this presentation, I've put the wrong one in there, but it's largely the same. But human pandemic and animal epidemic in our region sit at 4 and 5. So that just changes around a little bit. This is actually from Manawatu District Council, which is slightly different. But the regional landscape, hazardscape is what you see there. 4 is human pandemic, and 5 is. This is the region, John. Yeah, the region. Yeah, Horizons region. Yeah. Now, rider on that is that this is out of the 2016 to 2021, what's called CDM Group Plan, which has been held up in terms of getting the new plan. The CDM Group plans last for 5 years. There's a huge amount of work that goes into this hazard part of it. Because of COVID and the leftover and then the emergency management bill, they put a hold on doing new group plans because of the changes that were coming. They haven't yet arrived, but regional councils are now getting on, or CDM groups are now getting on with group plans. So we're going through the update of this matrix at the moment, which has got a workshop next week to work through what it looks like now. Because if you see human pandemic, which again sits at number 4 in our region, under the new once we do the new matrix, the new work around a hazardscape, where will that sit? Knowing what we know now post-COVID, Wellington and Auckland is actually number 1. So, I'm not sure where it'll sit with us.
Are we going to get an update on, or are you going to define our top hazards for our district?
It's a conversation we need to have because we've always relied on the regional hazardscape, which by and large probably suits us pretty well. But it is a conversation we should have, and it's something that probably does need to go into the work program.
I always thought the region had volcanoes on there, since they've got a volcano, but that doesn't affect us. Oh, okay.
In our region, severe earthquake, river flood, tsunami from the severe earthquake, etc. is probably but hard to argue against. But it'll be interesting to see where that pandemic sits in the matrix, knowing what we know now. So. In our structures, this is an image of the Manawatu floods of 2004. That's the Fielding Township. So just in a civil defence emergency, the local council or the civil defence, being i.e. the local council, will always be the lead agency in this type of event. There can be times where lead agencies change, but in a natural hazard disaster event like this, lead agency will always be civil defence. And we're supported by all these support agencies, which is only some of in this event here. Massive amount of support agencies, which you'll see shortly. But the significance obviously is civil defence is always going to lead a natural hazard type event by that's a statutory requirement obviously for us to lead that and makes absolute sense. There is coordination in this country, and coordination around civil defence is the buzzword. It is all about coordination, and there's no organisations that can do coordinate emergencies like local councils, regional councils, etc. That's why we become the lead agency by statute, supported by a huge amount of agencies behind that. Quickly touch on elected member role in emergencies because it's really important. It comes main burden, Bernie, you're right across as I know, is leadership in emergencies. It's the leadership that makes such a difference in emergencies and how it's portrayed to the community and what that communication with the community is. As I said, Mayor's the face of the community responses, and we see that all the time. As soon as there's a state or local emergency, particularly the Mayor will front, along with the local controller, and usually the emergency service is close to their side, and that's how it works. But the role of the council is equally important too, and it's again the face of the community. Any declaration of a local state of emergency must be made by an elected official. That's in statute. Usually the Mayor, if the Mayor was unavailable, the Deputy Mayor or Senior Member of Council can make a declaration. After that, there's a whole lot of other steps we can take as well, if it was that bad. Councillors, eyes and ears of the community. And a great example of this was I was fortunate enough to do some work with Central Hawke's Bay after Cyclone Gabriel. It led their review process, and what came out of that is that the role the councillors did have in Cyclone Gabriel up there, but how that did not quite set up quite a structure where councillors, elected members, could easily get information into the Emergency Operations Centre or get information out. So there's a lot of work going on around the country around that, and certainly we are bringing that, and we'll bring that to this organisation as well. In terms of,
it's good that you mentioned Cyclone Gabriel because I mean, like as you say, essentially all these systems failed. The whole CDM structure failed in that event, and so we're good to see how we're preparing for those sort of failures and events in the future as well.
And it's a really good point, and it did fail, and it failed because it was overwhelmed. But there's a number of different, and what the central government are looking at is streamlining how we structure emergency management throughout the country. And two examples of centralisation of emergency management over a period of time is Auckland. Auckland went from 8 local districts where they each had emergency operations centres, each had their own arrangements like we do in this district, and centralised that to central Auckland, basically through Auckland Emergency Management. The Auckland floods of January last year, or the year before, whatever it was, years go so quick, found that out, and that had been pre-identified that this might work day to day, but how does it work in a big emergency? And plainly it didn't, and the reports, reviews that have come out of that have highlighted that. The other example is actually Hawke's Bay. Hawke's Bay have a centralised model as well, apart from Central Hawke's Bay, who, while they are closely linked into Hawke's Bay Emergency Management, and from a regional perspective, they do have their own local emergency management team. The rest of the district doesn't. They have a centralised model out of Hastings, where there's a small ECC there that quickly became overwhelmed because they didn't have that reach and those networks out in those parts of the community because of that centralisation. Exactly the same in Auckland. So it was interesting to see how those events did pan out. Despite, apart from the fact that was a massive event, Gabriel was massive and would probably overwhelm most structures, but it has to improve. In our region, I think we've got the right structure. We've got a coordination point at the regional council who operate in that coordination role, and you've got 7 district and city councils across the region that all have the same
structure we've got here, our own teams, our own relationships, our own networks, but all work closely together. An example of that was the tornado. As soon as that happened here in 2022, the rest of the district, the rest of the region came to support us. Where phone calls were coming in really quickly from offers of support from around because of the relationships we have. So I think, from a structure point of view, I think we've got it right in this region. I'll be interested to see what the reviews come out with.
And so that's where, like, that localized tornado event means that the other TAs can support council, and I suppose it's where those regional events happen where there's more pressure, right? And so I guess the question through a risk lens is, there's obviously a focus on key people and being in key roles, and so how do we manage the risk around people but not being available or being out of region or out of district and not able to perform that role? Like, is there redundancy built in so that people can easily shift into roles? And
So carrying on this, and from Central Hawke's Bay was she clearly showed the importance of elected members being part of obviously not part of the emergency operations team, but being able to link in and link out really easily. And we've certainly put things in place here that and we'll test that next year in an exercise where I haven't talked to Brent about it yet, but I want to be bringing the elected members in to be part of that exercise in terms of sharing information in and out, because that's how you know what your systems and your processes. So really important that elected members are linked to the Emergency Operations Centre. And for elected member, it's really important there's one source of truth, and that's the stuff in an emergency, and that's the stuff that comes out of here. And what happened in Hawke's Bay was because there was a vacuum of information coming out and coming in, people started doing things under their own back because they thought that was the right thing to do, but it didn't help, So we're aware of those things, so we work through them. So here's one you probably want to look at, Sam, I think, This is the Horowhenua District Council Incident Management Team. And you'll see all the names up there that you all recognise. These are people that have been handpicked because of the right people for the roles we need them to do. And they've done a huge amount of training, which you'll see shortly, and we continue to do a huge amount of training. So our incident management team is in state of readiness at all times, and we can quickly activate the incident management team simply by an e-tech system we have, or quick phone calls, and get the team up and running. We continue to liaise with the IMT during heightened times where there is perhaps severe weather coming. We'll be in touch with the IMT really early to give them that early heads up awareness that this is coming, that we might there could need to be some kind of response. And these people are really invested into their roles and take their roles seriously. What you'll see at the top is probably the most important part, which is our controllers. We've got Brent, obviously, as one of the lead controllers, and then our alternates being Daniel and David, who are both in the room. And in the brackets there, I think called RRLDP, that's called the Response and Recovery Leadership Development Program. Both David and Brent have completed that, and Brent might want to quickly touch on that. Daniel will be scheduled to for this coming year, and we certainly like to get Mark Hammond through as our lead recovery person through that training too. And that training is led by the Joint Disaster Research Unit at Massey University in Wellington, in collaboration with National Emergency Management Agency. So just Brent might quickly want to talk about that.
Thanks, Ross. So I did my course LDP last year. It's made up of two parts. Tier 1 is a 7-week online module, and then you come together for a week of sort of intense scenarios thrown at you in training. It was really valuable. The first 7 weeks focused more on a high level of leadership and the principles of leadership, but then really sort of hone in on the skills that you learn in that week face-to-face course. We've got some budget to deliver this people on this course for the next 3 years, as we identified through the LTP, 3 or 4 years. So it's important that we, like Ross mentioned, continue to identify the right people that we send on these training courses.
And you also see that from a response manager point of view, which sits very closely with the controllers and to lead an event, myself and Jamie. We've also got Ben Blyton's done the response manager course this year. Ben is an alternate response manager, and behind all these people on the screen here, they've all got big teams behind them that continue to train, continue to upgrade. So we're in a pretty good space in that regard. It's a basic staffing structure on EOC, and you'll see from, if you go back to these, you'll see the list there of the functions. They are the functions there in an incident management team for an emergency operation. And that's under the thing we call the SIM structure, Coordinated Incident Management System, which is used widely across the country for emergencies and incidents, etc. All levels. Sorry. Oh,
Yeah, can I just ask a quick question? I mean, the devil's in the detail. It's a good structure overall. You've talked about the incident management team, and then you've got this. But do they understand what their role is within this structure? And I think that's the big thing that's sort of missing. And have you identified what are the critical services that we would potentially, in a disaster or in a crisis, that we'd want to bring up first, so that everybody is aware that that is the number one focus? And I think that, having had experience in this myself, that those are the two key things. I think understanding what their role is, and then understanding what the order of services that needs to be brought up first.
Good question. And if the next couple of slides a little bit about exercising, and I'll probably talk about that then if it's all right, because that touches on that. But yeah, we've done a lot of work. A lot of our training that we go through all points to that, and the exercising we do explores that further. So, for instance, we had a full exercise earlier this year where it was a Cyclone Gabriel type response. It was that was coming. So we're the day before it arrived. What preparations are we putting in place? What do we need to make sure are in place first? And all our exercising is pointing. We're doing with our teams is pointing towards that. So exactly that point you've just made is that preparation and that knowledge of what things you do first to prevent that further impacts on the community. So
Roscoe, so just picking up on Sarah's point, the role definition, the part of the SIM structure helps with that, doesn't it? Because like all those colours, basically a person puts on a vest that has their role, and then they're really clear about their scope and function, and presumably that's part of the training that they're clear about what the parameters of that role is. Is that how that SIM structure works?
And I think just to add in, Councillor Jennings, around with the SIM structure, our desk leads and our alternate, we will give them function-specific training, so they'll go on courses, so they really do know what the expectations are. But I guess the caveat as well is if we are short on people and we're standing up a response, we will move people as we see fit based on what we require.
Ross, sorry not to interrupt, but can you just use your microphone so online can hear?
Yep, sorry, Nash. And then leadership training, which is equally important. Extensive exercising programs is there. By the end of this year, we'll have conducted 2 full EOC exercises, various incident management team exercises, SIMS functional exercising, which we're doing at the moment. We've been through 3 of the SIMS functions. So that scenarios, I think everyone in the room, is a targeted incident scenario, which is very different than an emergency, and that's to test our thinking around how we respond to these things. And we're working closely with our community response group, Shannon and Tokomaru, with an exercise coming up on the 9th of November. We've just done a cross-boundary exercise last week with Kapiti Coast Emergency Management Team, Incident Management Team, and Emergency Management Committees down in Otiki, which was last Thursday. So it went really well.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Brett, you go.
I was just going to add in probably my observation over the last two years as well. Our staff are more hungry for more training and more exercising, and it's probably on the back of significant events such as Gabrielle. But we get people coming more frequently now asking to be put on courses to do more. Some of our desk managers are taking ownership of their function themselves and training and doing exercises out of scope or meeting with their group just to make sure that they're ready to go. So it's a really strong focus across the organisation, which is really pleasing.
I'm going to jump in and ask a question that I was going to save to the end because I know we're going to run out of time. Sam's going to end it. And this is probably relevant for some of the slides coming up as well. I mean, there seems to be a big gap around iwi in here and iwi capacity, but also training iwi in these things, these scenarios. And the other thing that's missing in here is probably how iwi now using marae as civil defence posts or centres or whatever you want. I know that the iwi across here, and I'm probably a little bit biased here, Moopuka are the only one that's got a resilience plan or developing a resilience plan and building that capability internally to respond to emergencies, and are working to develop their marae so that they are more resilient and can operate as those bases as well. And I know that the bill that was with the previous government, the iwi components of that bill are still intact, and they should put more emphasis on iwi being involved in these processes and response and recovery. And there's a whole other dimension which probably doesn't relate to our district about iwi being able to stand up at a centre when it's needed as well, based on what they observe.
So all you've spoken about is highly on the radar. It is in progress. It hasn't gone as quickly as we wanted it to be. I've been working with Kelly around the resilience plan for Moopuka, and but really through Neville and Ricky Alahara's iwi liaisons, there are those links. We've done some marae training in this room, but we want to do that sort of differently. We're just trying to work through at the moment how the best way is to engage that wide iwi groups around getting them that consistent training. What we do know, John and team, is through our relationships, we know that already established in this space that we could stand up a marae pretty quickly and to support a response. But we just want to get through that, formalise a lot more, and certainly the training and that capability stuff around that. So high on our radar, and I think next year we'll get stuck into that.
Because just closing the loop on that, because we have, there's a training piece in the capability capacity building part, but from an infrastructure part of the Better Off funding that council committed was to equip marae with water tanks and generators, was it? And so that's a piece of the puzzle, I guess. 3 water, yeah.
Yeah, and Sam was we have begun looking at an energy resilience component of that as well. Electra are very, very keen to partner with us on that, and we've already had conversations with Te Puni Kōkiri around forwarding that, and that's not now going to happen until next year, but there is certainly the energy in that space. It's just getting the resourcing at the right time to do it. So, yeah.
Sorry, just a quick question, Ross, around why Shannon and Tukumara are Nopiki and not the other parts of the district.
So, yeah. Well, we're probably going to lose them because they're all busy mowing their boobs out. No, let's get back to what we're here for. The Tukumara Opiki have been sort of going a long time. They're led by Graham Purvis up there, and they've done a great job. We've sort of just harnessed them a lot more and working a lot closely with them. Shannon came from Shannon through Sharon Williams and Carol Christensen, a couple others up there, have been asking for it for quite some time too. So we were able to put the resourcing in and get them established. The obvious is what's next, and from our exercising plainly Malakau Waikawa, we need to sort of like start looking at the same thing down there. So again, it's just resourcing, Bernie. Yeah. So I know we're running out of time, but just want to quickly show you this one. So this is our training statistics through the integrated training framework. That, again, our main training source. The foundation course is a half-day CDM focused course, and that is the entry-level foundation. So we've got 132 of our staff have done that course. Intermediate, it's a 2-day course, so to have 87 staff through that 2-day course, and that delves deeply into the planning, the intelligence gathering component of an emergency operations centre, and there's an exercise on the second day as well. And the function course, which is those SIMS functions you saw, so far 47 people have been through those function courses and more before the end of the year. So that's building really nicely. So
So we're pushing that training all the time. I'll walk through that one pretty quick. That's just some images of the trainings we've done so far. The exercising, it's the full exercise on the left. You'll see the rainbow of colours there. There's a briefing on the bottom, and the ones on the right are there. Logistics function course exercise we ran recently on a certain scenario, which I'll keep secret at the moment, because there's more to come. But that went really well, and the team did really well towards a challenging exercise. So a little bit on the building. We know the building's pretty resilient for emergencies. We have the generator that comes in. We have and some resilience factors within the building. We have 80 kVA mobile generator on a trailer that funds will power up the Salvation Army, which is our lead emergency civil defence centre for Levin. And we have some alternates in other areas, and that's not we're touching on the Marae capability that we know we've got as well. So, Emergency Management Committee, we meet once a month. That's a really engaged, response-focused committee led by us, but all emergency services, and as you'll see the components there. Most emergency management committees around the country work. So I meet 4 times a year. Our committee meets monthly, and they want to meet monthly, and they want those relationships and those networks to be strong, and that works really well for us. We have a local welfare group, which we had a meeting yesterday. We ran an exercise for them. That was a couple of days before a big cyclone type event, and we challenged them to think about their BCPs, think about what role they would play during an emergency in the community, but also how they could support the Emergency Operations Centre in a prolonged event. And Ash and Julia led that from a welfare group point of view, and they went really, really well. And I think we're just about there. Shannon Response Group reached 22 members. We're doing an exercise with them in Tokomaru in the 9th of November, and that'll test the arrangements with them as well. And they're really looking forward to that one. And we'll move on to a lot more stuff with them next year and keep them going. Yeah. We're really strong, absolutely strong. And I don't know if you talk to this or not, but
I'll quickly touch on the current resources. So obviously, currently, council contracts service to Emergency Management Services Limited. The contract goes through till 2026. We do have a Section 17A scheduled for next year to inform how we want to continue. Do we want to continue delivering it from a contract method or bring it in-house? The current contract allows for one staff member 3 full days on site here. However, moving forward, we're seeing, given the more frequent events and the focus on emergency management, a lot more. There's probably an opportunity for more in that space, which will obviously form our LTP conversation at some point and factor in likely to the Section 17A review. So we have 365 24/7 support from Emergency Management Services Limited. Over the last few years, we've had a number of events and received really good support, obviously.
Just one quick comment. I know Emergency Management Services is more focused on operations and running a centre, and not so much the strategic focus, but does there need to be a better link between some of our initiatives around climate change and emergency management? I mean, I know Horizons hasn't listed climate change in one of its priorities as natural hazards, but the government direction is that climate change will be an exacerbator of many of the natural hazards that they're dealing with anyway.
Yeah. So just thinking about the need and the requirements going forward, presumably that review that's happening with the Gabrielle stuff that you referenced before, that will also perhaps add into this around like expectations around what, because we've obviously got a baseline here, but if the review says actually no, you need to have more capacity or more, you need to dedicate more investment, like do we think that that's something that's likely to come out of the review?
Look, if there is something that does have that sort of information in any of the reviews, we'll definitely factor that into what we're doing as well and how we move forward.
Cool.
Sorry? Sorry, that's pretty much all. Except that's it. Yep. Oh,
Well-
sorry, it's about rushed.
No, it's
I think it's all about the stuff.
No, this is good. This has given us a really good overview with that risk lens in terms of the other things that we've been discussing today. So really thank you for that. Just quickly, we've got 2 minutes for any questions, queries, comments anyone wants to make. Otherwise, thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate it. That was really insightful. So what I'll do is I'll declare that the meeting closed, or we did our closing karakia, and then hopefully members can have a quick break before we crack into briefings and workshops. Find that closing karakia. Oh, there we go. Kia whakatu tatou, kia wātea whitia, kia tūriki whakatu, kia tūriki tukatai ai, haumea huia tae kia. Thank you, everybody.